at the forefront of politics.
Our enemy is Trump. He is the enemy. We gotta unite. If we're not a united party, we lose to Trump.
On the front lines of activism.
There's certain fights, if we don't engage, they win. This is a fundamental question of who we are.
And delivering your daily dose of comedy.
Donald Trump, when he had his physical, they had his blood pressure, and mine is higher than his. Oh. And the irony is mine is higher because of him.
From the blue wave.
We flipped. Enough seats to take control of the House. We control the House.
To 2020 and beyond. This is the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress, Channel 127.
And welcome to the Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live here Wednesday, August 21st. I'm Dean Obeidallah, hoping to be your MBFF. I'm there for you. I'm needy. I'm the neediest Muslim. But who is here who has stayed on from his show to continue the conversation we were just having? On his show, it is Michelangelo Signorelli, the host.
GBBF.
You're my GBFF.
BFF, sorry.
Right, so I'm the MBFF. A lot of BFFs going on here, folks. So Michael wrote a great article for the Washington Post today that I wanted to talk about. Michael, welcome to my show, and thanks for having me on your show a few minutes ago.
Absolutely.
So in your article, it's titled, Trump has a devastating record on LGBTQ rights. Don't deny the truth. And I want people to hear the truth. I want them to hear what the truth sounds like in regards to Trump, because there's a lot of misinformation intentionally put out there. Before we get to log cabin Republicans, let's talk about policy that you outlined in your article here. First of all, there's a Justice Department just flipped on Friday a position from the Obama administration. So tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, there's a executive order that President Obama signed back in, this was actually a Labor Department issue, I think is what you're referring to, back in 2014, banning discrimination against LGBT people among federal contractors, anybody doing business with the government. Bill Clinton had already signed an order that banned discrimination against LGBT people, gay people in the federal workforce. Obama expanded it to transgender people. Now, this one was contractors, anybody doing business with the government. Trump had promised he wouldn't change that, and they pushed a rule, the Labor Department, last week to basically overturn that.
So the real-world impact would be that federal contractors could say no to someone who's in the LGBTQ community just because of who they are and go, sorry, and,
right.
and they can still get money from the government.
Right. They could still get taxpayer dollars if it's a company that it is, contracted with the government to do any kind of work. They can just say, we don't, agree with this person because they're gay, they're bisexual, they're transgender, and fire them or not hire them.
And also, in the last week, on Friday, the Justice Department filed a brief in a case, the Supreme Court's hearing, and they're arguing to allow employers to turn away and fire transgender workers based solely on their gender identity, which is also a flip-flop from the Obama administration.
Well, so this case, and there are actually two cases before the Supreme Court, and the Justice Department is expected this week to weigh in on the second one, and it refers specifically to sexual orientation and discrimination. This is not just contractors. This is everyone. This is every business everywhere. This would there are states that ban this discrimination among employers. This would override states. This would make it, if the Supreme Court legalizes this, it would be everything. Now, in the transgender case, this really has worked very, very carefully through the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They ruled that under the 1964 Civil Rights Act, transgender people should be covered under the word sex, no discrimination based on sex. It has gone up through the federal courts. The circuit courts have all agreed with that argument. So there's been no circuit court split. So it's even kind of odd it's at the Supreme Court, because usually if there's no circuit court split, they just leave it. The gay case, it is a case regarding a skydiver who's actually dead, and they're just continuing the case. The family's continuing the case. But it was a case of him being fired because he was gay. And EEOC also said Title VII, should cover this. It should be considered under sex, because you're still fired based on sex in the sense that it's about who you are, and even if it's about who you are involved in a relationship with. So that has had a circuit court split. And so that's usually why the Supreme Court takes it up. But if the Supreme Court were to rule, and the Trump administration, what's the surprise here is they hadn't, in the lower courts, they hadn't filed in the transgender case. They hadn't taken a side.
But now
they did in the gay one,
right?
But now they're basically weighing in, and they're saying they're trying to get the Supreme Court to decide what is biological sex. This would be a landmark kind of a thing. They want the Supreme Court to say your gender is your quote unquote biological sex.
They want the right-wing evangelical interpretation of biology, essentially. And what's been the reaction of Donald Trump's Christian right base to this kind of actions?
They are ecstatic. First of all, on the federal contractor rollback, every religious right group just weighed in right away, like, this is what we've been waiting for. We know behind the scenes they're also pressuring, like they must have pressured him on this transgender case too. So they're ecstatic. They see it as he is doing their bidding. And I want to make something really clear here. George Bush was very anti-gay. George Bush, to try to win re-election, pushed a federal marriage amendment, right, in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
It may or may not have helped him. There's still a lot of debate as to whether it got the religious right out or did it get us out as much, whatever. But he did win the election. But even with that, one thing about George W. Bush, one thing about every president, at least when it's come to rights of gay and lesbian, bisexual Americans, and now even we hope it would be with transgender Americans, they never rolled back the executive orders of the previous president. So George Bush never rolled back Bill Clinton's executive order banning discrimination in the federal workforce. It just would be, it's just something you wouldn't do. This is a whole new, he is rolling back all kinds of things. Like they're now, they pushed a rule to take away the protections in the Affordable Care Act for LGBT people. So it's rolling back everything Obama.
And it started with students, right? I mean, wasn't it about the rollback of the Obama directive on the treatment of transgender students, as you mentioned in your article?
That's right. That was within weeks of the administration, beginning. They put forth a rollback on a directive Obama. It was a pretty amazing thing they had done at the end of the administration, the Obama administration, basically a directive to high schools across the country. It's not even a mandatory thing. It's just on how you should treat transgender students.
Right. And they roll that back. And as well as something that we talked about before we came on air, and I've talked about on the show, is that I think with Jorge was on, about the Trump administration is rolling back protections for transgender homeless people and allowing shelters to get federal funds to say no to transgender Americans who are homeless from entering. So you have people who are vulnerable already. They're homeless. They're also vulnerable because they're transgender. And the Trump administration's cruelty knows no bounds. So they want to allow these organizations that are right-wing Christian Sharia activists to say no to someone transgender who's in place of a need just to sleep indoor for a night and not have to live on the street or get beaten up or killed. And they're going to say no, and they're fine with it all in the name of Jesus. This is the different Jesus than I know.
And this is Ben Carson who is doing all that. That's all out of Housing and Urban Development, right? These shelters. And it's Ben Carson, who's evangelical Christian, and that's what he's pushing. It's cruel. It's throwing people out in the streets. And if you're somebody who cares about dollars and taxpayer dollars and all, it's creating more of a burden in that sense, just so you can mistreat transgender people.
And I'm chatting with the one and only Michelangelo Signorelli. People were like, is his show extended today? Because they're hearing you on, like, what's going on? And Michael stayed for a few minutes about his article in the Washington Post, which I tweeted out at Dean Obidala. I retweeted it right before the show. I tweeted it again.
Oh, thanks.
And you're tagged in it, and you can check it out on Michael's
I'll get a good look.
Twitter account as well. But let's talk about, overall, objectively, is Donald Trump the most anti or the most hostile president of modern day to the LGBT community?
I would say in modern day, I mean,
we don't know
it's
in the old days what happened.
Yeah, it's so hard. Although, there's some historical data about George Washington even on this issue, believe it or not, on the issue of sodomy and punishing people and whatnot. But I mean, in terms of policy, we really can only go back to Reagan well, I guess we can go back to Eisenhower, and we had the purges during the McCarthy era. Reagan really brought the religious right into the Republican Party, and then of course AIDS was devastating, and you can't say, well, Trump is worse in terms of the outcome if the outcome under Reagan was so much death.
People dying.
But
was a justification for Reagan not addressing the AIDS crisis to make the evangelical right happy? Was it the same reason, that to make his right-wing base happy, so they didn't care if people who were gay were dying?
Yeah, I mean, that was basically it. There was no political power by gay people really at that time within the Democratic Party, or very little.
Right.
And they just weren't a force. And the religious right was this force. They didn't want to see education about safer sex in schools and whatnot. And
spending federal money to do research. They were opposed to tax dollars to save lives, all in the name of Jesus Christ, of course. Yeah.
But where I'd say Trump really is the worst is that we've attained so much. So, at that time,
right,
there wasn't a lot that was attained. And now you're rolling back 30 years of progress. That is what is really astounding here.
And adding to this astounding moment is that after this record that you've just documented, the Log Cabin Republicans, a group of LGBT Republicans and straight allies, just endorsed Donald Trump last week. Can you help us make sense? Because the record you went through is horrific. It would be like a Muslim group endorsing Donald Trump right now after the Muslim ban and demonizing Rashida and Ilhan, and go, you know what? I like, and tell us the most bizarre part of this. They didn't endorse him in 2000.
They didn't endorse him in 2016.
Why didn't they endorse him? Do you know why?
Because of his hostility toward other groups. They actually recognized that he was somebody who was a horrible misogynist, a racist, and they actually, that was part of their thinking, that they were putting all of that into the mix. And I've had them on my program, and they said at that time they didn't think on gay stuff because he certainly hadn't yet done the kinds of stuff. Now, he had been making the promises to the religious right. We all knew where he was going to go, but they held that in consideration. So when you think about it now, there's no argument, because now he's done all these anti-gay things, and he's done all these horrible things to all these other people.
And they're like, now we like the guy. I mean, what do you...
Well,
how does it make sense?
Some of them fell away. The ones who stayed, they're just as deeply embedded as the rest of the Republican Party. What happened to them is what happened to the Republican Party. We have people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio and all saying Trump is a monster, he's going to destroy our party, and now today saying he's wonderful. The same thing happened to these log cabin Republicans. They're thinking about their future in the party. There were a couple of resignations over this endorsement even in the last couple of days, so some of them fell away now. But there aren't that many of them. They're a small group within a minority group already.
It's interesting you say that the people within the GOP, because at the beginning I would say Trump is the GOP and the GOP is Trump. And I may have been ahead of the curve, but now that's completely true. I was saying that right when he got elected, and I'm like, and the people are like, I'm not sure, but now there are, because I just wrote about, for last week for the Daily Beast, how the New York Young Republicans in 2016, there were articles, they were interviewed by the New York Times going, we don't like this guy, we don't want to get involved, he doesn't represent the party, we're afraid he's the face of the party. Flash forward, now they have white supremacists come speak at their meetings. They have Jack Posobiec, who I wrote about, who uses the code 1488, which is white supremacy. I covered that OK thing, which we all know what that means. Right there. Now, they took that down when the article went up, but we took a screen grab because we knew they would. And they had Pamela Gellers, just speaker in New York City. I can only imagine red states what they're doing, like just... I don't even want to get into it, and I don't want to be flipped.
Republicans have done is they have sort of rationalized the religious rights agenda, because what's most startling to me about this is that the religious right believes they're getting everything they want.
Right.
And here you have the log cabin Republicans putting out an endorsement saying he's been a great president on LGBT rights. I mean, under George Bush, just going back to him, the religious right wasn't totally happy. Like, they didn't think they got everything they wanted. and you had log cabin Republicans withholding the endorsement of Bush over the marriage amendment. So you actually had, a much much closer sort of range here. Now you have both of these groups thinking Trump's done something great for them. And I think it gets to how, there's so much fake news out there that they just can all believe what they want. You know what I mean? There's so much disinformation in the system that they can all believe what they want.
Well, by having the log cabin Republicans endorse Trump, it gives cover for bigots within the GOP to say, "Hey, he can't be that bad. Look, he's endorsed by."
He did it. He said that himself.
Right. Right. So you've got exactly. He did. So that's the troubling part of this. That it is whitewashing, bigotry. That is manifested in policies, folks. This is why I went through that with Michael first. It's not just rhetoric. I talk a lot about Trump's rhetoric, and then it results in hate crimes. This is hateful rhetoric that's turned into policies to make his base happy. And that's what the GOP really is. And so for Trump, they have their dream come true. He is an empty vessel who will do whatever they want because he's desperate to be reelected. So he knows, because as you put in your article, only 14% of the LGBT community voted for him in 2016. So he can lose all the LGBT community as long as he keeps the evangelical community on. Because if he loses the evangelicals, then he's got nothing. He's dead. It's a horror. He'll lose like we've never seen before. So he gives them everything he wants, including, we talked about on your show earlier, Israel and Palestine. The dogmatic evangelicals, they're doing this so Jesus returns and the Jews disappear in their fantasy sci-fi world that they live in. Then there'll be this tribulation period and 2/3 of the Jews will die and the last third will all convert to Christianity. So you've got people who are looking at the Bible like it's a playbook for policy, not for a touchstone to live your life in a good way. And I've never seen this. I've never seen the religious right as emboldened and empowered today. And you see it also manifesting in state laws like Alabama. Women, no abortion at all. I mean, we've gone beyond everything. Like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, that's where we are now. They're going back. They are regressing as a party. We're the Progress Channel. That's why I think Patriots should be called Regress. Like, we're Progress, and they should be called the Regressive Channel with I'm not going to say the names of the hosts, but you know who they are. So are you optimistic? What's your look for 2020 with your community? Are they going to get more engaged? Have they been very engaged in 2018? I'm assuming they are.
People were just, organizing like crazy in communities all across this country. And I think LGBT activists have been very much a part of that blue wave and literally a part of that blue wave, because we saw the first transgender people elected to office in state legislatures in Colorado, in Virginia, and talking about a diverse set of issues they were focused on. I think that's only going to be further because of Donald Trump, because the religious liberty argument is what is really scaring people, that you can discriminate against people based on religious liberty. That is the thing that he's promoting and the thing we're going to have to fight against.
The hate for Jesus crowd. We have a caller who's got a question about the log cabin Republicans. Can we take that call before I let you go? And then we'll let you go. Here's George in Alabama. George, how are you tonight?
Yes, good afternoon. How are you doing? My question is,
yes,
if the log cabin Republicans or the LGBT community, why would they support Trump after all he's done against them?
It's a great question.
Yeah. Look, like I said earlier about the other Republicans, they think about the future in the party. It's mostly white men who are probably well off. They're thinking about tax cuts, right? And they think they'll be okay. They think it's like, why are there this small minority of Jews who still support Trump? Why are there a small, 24%. Tiny portion of black people, or
about 10%?
There's always a few who think they're going to be immune, and that never happens. When you support white supremacists, they're coming to get all of us.
That's exactly, and the title of today is for the show on Twitter is that now they came for the Jews and the LGBT community, and this is what's going on. And that famous, it is so bizarre that so many of us in the time of Trump quote that poem from the Holocaust written by the pastor. Who would thought in American politics we would be talking about it in the context of the President of the United States, not random white supremacist groups or whatever? Because of the words from the guy in the White House, we are quoting a poem from the Holocaust to remind us of the potential consequences and why we must all speak out and unite. Because when they come against your community, I'm there, and vice versa. And our allies from all different communities, whoever you are, we have to be there for each other because we're minorities, and hence the term minority. We're a small subset of this country. So, George, it's a great question. No one knows the answer. We're going to try to get them on the show to see if we can ask them. All right, George, thanks for the call, my friend. Michael, thank you very much for staying after your show.
This
I
was
appreciate
great.
it.
And thank
Check
you for
out
coming
Michael's
on my
article.
show.
Sure. Check out Mike's article. It's on his Twitter account. It's on my Twitter feed at Dean Obidala. And we'll be right back. We'll talk a little bit more. We'll take some calls. Michael's going to go. Mike, thanks very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dean.
Right back after this.
The Dean Obidala Show.
I think Trump clips that they play on the media should come with a health warning saying that if you watch this, you'll get dumber. Never has somebody